Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Welcome to another episode. If you're following the 100-100 party in the countdown, that is 153 days, 10 hours, 36 minutes, and 12 seconds from now. Let's dive into the world of indexes and indexing. Actually, before I do, a quick shout out to our distribution partners at OBBM Network and BlessedNewsTV.com. Super thankful for all the help that we've been getting in setting up our distribution and these podcasts with OBBM Network and BlessedNewsTV.com. So imagine for a moment I were to suggest the following stock picks. Now, trust me, these are not stock picks. Actually, these are the opposite. These are the things that I would suggest not investing in. But imagine knowing what you know about me and listening to the conversations around UnWoke. What if one day I suggested that you add to your portfolio Microsoft Corporation, Apple Incorporated, NVIDIA, Amazon, Alphabet Inc., which is the parent company of Google, Meta Platforms, that's Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, Broadcom, Tesla, Eli Lilly, JP Morgan, Visa Incorporated, ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble Company. If you remember way back, remember I did that expose on Procter & Gamble and how woke their 401k plan is? MasterCard, Home Depot, Costco, Merck, the pharmaceutical company, Merck. Oh my goodness. What else do we have on here? Salesforce. Salesforce is one that I like to make fun of because they are woke-a-doodle. Bank of America. What are the chances I'm going to recommend investing in Bank of America? Walmart. Walmart. A friend of mine years ago used to call Walmart the Death Star of retail. So anyway, the list goes on. We have Abbott Labs, Cisco, Verizon, Walt Disney Company, Qualcomm, Pfizer. We all know about Pfizer. Oh boy, Boeing. Boeing is having some issues right now with their plane manufacturing. BlackRock, Citigroup. Anyway, you get the point. Starbucks. I'm going to stop there. Imagine if I jumped on a podcast one day and suggested that you rush right out and buy all those things. It's not going to happen. But it sort of does a lot in the world of investing. You find a lot of people who are encouraged to just simply cut cost and dump their money into an index. Well, what I was reading from is something called the S&P 500. Now, let's back up a step and go back in time and talk briefly about what an index is and where that S&P 500 came from, because it's kind of important. Imagine, if you will, that you and I sat down together one day and decided that we're going to create an index of our own. This is sort of a mental experiment so that we understand what indexes are and what they represent. We could decide to make any kind of index, virtually anything imaginable. And really, there are tens of thousands of them that exist all over the world. And here's how they work. Let's say we could pick a geography like a country or size of business. We could only pick really, really large or really, really small companies, or we could pick a basket of different countries that we follow. That's done. Like Brazil, Russia, India, and China are often referred to as BRIC countries, and there are indexes that are based on those. And remember, all an index is just basically a broad basket of different companies that are selected for that investment. And let's say that we wanted to put on our thinking caps and create a new kind of index that doesn't exist, and we wanted to focus. I'm just going to pick on healthcare because I do that a lot because COVID. So let's imagine that we sat down together and we decided we're going to create and shape an index that's based on healthcare. First thing we would have to do is define healthcare. We could expand it to include all kinds of different stuff around the world of healthcare, like construction companies that build hospital facilities and pharmaceutical. We would have to decide whether or not that's actually included in healthcare. There are even really specific companies out there that work very selectively and exclusively within the world of healthcare, like job placement services. There are actually companies out there that place and move around and manage the hiring and firing of medical staff, administrators, doctors, etc. So once we define all of that, then we have this index, we have a description of different types of companies, and then we would use that to figure out which companies fit in there. And you could, again, we could decide to focus on large companies or emerging small companies within the world of healthcare, and poof, voila, we have our index. Well, a long time ago, some people in the United States, easy for me to say, some people in the United States created the S&P 500. The S&P 500, the name is now misleading, but back in the day, over 100 years ago, it was originally meant to be 500 companies in the United States that represented American industry. And so you can imagine through the years, as we've moved over 100 years from industry and manufacturing and iron and steel work, etc., into the things that we do now, that S&P 500 has changed along with it. And S&P 500 is what's called market cap weighted. What that means is the bigger the company, the more emphasis that it takes, the bigger the space it takes up within the S&P 500. So, leading the top of the list of what currently comprises the S&P 500 is Microsoft and Apple. Those are two companies that currently I would not suggest investing in. I believe that they are woke as heck, and they are rife with woke-a-doodle, and they're ready for competitors to come in and just seize the day and create better we the people types of alternatives. And that's where my heart leads me, and that's where I hope that you end up thinking in terms of those small emerging market, those free enterprise types of endeavors, not the big globalist cabal, if you will. So the reason for bringing this up is, well, a couple of things that are, I think, just super cool and I'm really thankful for. One is I got some feedback that the microphone in this position, rather than off camera, picks up my voice better. Hopefully you hear me loud and clear. Thank you for that feedback. And there's also a really nice gentleman that I've gotten to know a little bit via direct message, who got a hold of me several days ago with a series of questions about going unwoke. I'm really always truly very thankful to get these. It shows that people are listening and people are interested in tuning in, and I'm honored. I'm honored to get these questions, and some of them pertain to the S&P 500. But let's clarify what that actually means. That pretend index that I just sort of fabricated with you, it doesn't actually exist. We're pretending to create a healthcare type of index. And even the S&P 500, the indexes all over the world, those indexes are not something that you can invest in. Indexes are just a description of a bunch of different companies that fit in whatever sort of guide rails that you set up or whatever definition you have for those basket of different investments. You can't invest in that. But let's say that you and I created our pretend hypothetical healthcare based index, but then we publish the description of how we define it. Somebody out there, some investment manager, could try to recreate that as an actual investment. So they could go out and use our methodology, our thought process, and buy those same companies. What they're doing is basing an investment off of the index that we've created. That's what the S&P 500 index is. So when you look at companies out there that are offering indexing, that's what they're doing. They're reading somebody else's idea of a description of an array of different investments, and then they're indexing. They like doing that. It's inexpensive for investment managers because they don't have to do a lot of work. They don't have to go out and try and pick and choose and find good ones or bad ones. All they have to do is just watch the methodology, the description of the index, and match it. It's super cheap. You can set a computer on autopilot and it'll do that stuff all day long. So indexing from an investment management standpoint is really low cost. And from the consumer standpoint, that's the people who buy indexes, it's super cheap compared to an active manager. Starting way back 8-ish years ago, the monkey wrench of ESG and DEI and CRT and all that stuff entered into the mix, and it really clouds things up. It just gummed up the works. I'm describing to you the way that it should work. That's the way that it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have managers out there that actually care about the investments and go out there and do the research and due diligence for you. That takes time and money, and they have to have people reading all of the tax reports and management filings and all that stuff. It does. It takes time and money. So therefore, their cost is higher. That's why active management, or again, that's hiring managers to do the research for you. It costs more than indexing. But when you get into what we want to accomplish, which is getting our money out of the hands of these globalist cabal who are funneling money into the far left wokeadoodle companies, causes, and countries. Again, harken back to my earlier discussion about the roughly 4.3 billion net new dollars flowing into communist China. That's a major problem. A big chunk of that is coming out of investment dollars from the West, from US citizens, from European citizens. So we're actually allowing investment managers to take our money and put it into those terrible things that we don't want. They don't fit with our value system. And at the same time, when we're putting money into those big, giant globalist things like Walmart, when we're putting money into Visa and Meta and Alphabet Company, we're taking from what could be funding for small business enterprise, the next new thing that should come along and replace them, and hopefully not be woke. So the examples abound. When you look, just one example that pops into my head is Public Square, because people ask me about that a lot. Public Square is making some really good waves in being unwoke and creating parallel economy. And yes, I am a little frustrated. I think that they went public too early, but they are publicly traded, and it is a possibility to include Public Square in your portfolio. But Public Square is not going to be found in indexing. You're not going to find Public Square in the S&P 500, at least not for a long time yet, until they get really big and overtake somebody. But in the meantime, they want funding, and you want, or should want, your funding, your dollars, your investments not to go into the companies that crush places like Public Square. So for that reason, when it comes to what's the Shark Tank thing, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm done. There's no chance that I'm going to be recommending these wokeadoodle companies in any way, shape, or form, from an active manager, from an index, or in your portfolio as individual holdings. They shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be putting your money into those. So I am actually researching alternatives. And yes, I am trying to find good active managers that they will be a quick, hopefully easy, simple to understand point and shoot answer for you as an investor, that you can understand reasonable fees, get invested in a way that's not woke far left like those indexes. Stay tuned. I actually had conversations a few days ago with a great new company that I've stumbled onto. I think I am predicting terrific new friendship. These are investment managers that is from all the research and due diligence I've done so far, and I've got a little bit more work ahead of me. They're in line with everything we're talking about. And they are investment managers. They've been building portfolios of non-woke investments. I'm hoping that we're able to get through the due diligence. I'm able to get to the point where I feel comfortable and I can just start putting their name out there and encouraging people to go to them. I hope that we get to that point. Stay tuned. In the meantime, we have a couple of things. My ongoing research on things like mutual funds, exchange traded funds. If you're an investor, you'll know what some of these mean. ETF for short, exchange traded funds. Unit investment trusts, collective investment trusts, separately managed accounts, account managers, and all those different types of getting packaged investment management guidance and due diligence. Short of that, there is always, remember, go back to the earlier podcast that I did on tried and true methods. Our parents and grandparents bought and held stock portfolios. Don't be afraid of that. It isn't necessarily the answer for everybody out there, but it's shameful that we've gotten to the point where very few people even consider it. We've fallen into this trap of thinking that a mutual fund or something like it is really our only option. It's not true. As we do research on these companies, and I talk about great American companies that could be part of a wonderful portfolio for you to build of a broad base of lots of different stocks, there's nothing stopping you, or there should be nothing stopping you from building a stock portfolio of individual issues. So again, just for anybody who's unclear on that distinction, if you go out and buy a series of different companies, and again, you heard me read that list of the companies I'm recommending you not buy. If you were the opposite and you're far left, woke, you like this stuff, you could go out and buy all those individual companies in small increments and build a portfolio and actually own those stocks directly. They would be held in a stock portfolio for you. Alternatively, if you were far left, woke-a-doodle, and liked all that stuff, you could buy a different, an exchange traded fund or mutual fund, or you're actually paying a manager to buy those stocks for you. They're similar, and the result is, as far as what you're invested in, is going to be remarkably similar, but they're different ways of holding portfolio. What that means for folks like you and me, the unwoke type, is that in 401k and in your IRA and in your investment account and through your bank and online in your brokerage, you have the ability, or should have the ability, to buy individual companies. And those individual companies, when you buy them and you own stocks of those individual companies, not a mutual fund, but an actual individual company, you can know and track them and keep track of how woke or non-woke they are. And if they are a good, solid, unwoke type of investment, again, I'm just using that descriptor broadly, meaning it's a company that's not buying into the woke-a-doodle far left nonsense. If you own that in your portfolio, you can feel comfortable. You know what you own. It's clear. It's not going to change. That's another important distinction. I'm just going to touch on that briefly. It's kind of a side note, but it's important. One of the things to remember when you're buying a mutual fund is you're giving that person discretion over your portfolio. So let's say that they start off good, but eventually they sort of drift into the woke. You might discover next year or 3 years from now or 7 years from now, your portfolio has changed drastically. If you don't pay attention to the trades and what they're buying, you might end up in a whole bunch of things that you don't like. So maybe it starts off good, but they've changed their philosophy or their belief system, or maybe the manager leaves and goes somewhere else and a new manager comes in. That happens as well. Those are all issues in mutual funds and things like them. It's who is driving that portfolio guidance. That doesn't happen when you are decidedly, specifically working with a manager who is not woke. So there are a couple of different ways of getting that. One is you do it yourself. I'm feeding out guidance, and I'm hopeful that you're able to grab that, run with it wherever you are. By the way, remember, if you have a 401k that only has mutual fund options, you should be asking your employer about the ability to add self-directed brokerage window. Remember that term, self-directed brokerage window. If they give you any resistance, come to me. I have some guidance for you. You can take it into your HR office or your CFO that should help you to kind of break that logjam and maybe get access. But what that means is your ability to buy individual stocks with your 401k right where you are. It's a beautiful thing. It's much more clear and transparent. And remember, going back to my earlier comments about fees, even indexes have an ongoing fee. There's a cost associated just with the holding of that mutual fund. You can avoid those by owning individual stocks. Now, remember, there's a trade-off with individual stocks. You're going to have a trade cost. You're going to have the cost of buying it, but once you own it in your portfolio, there should be very, very little cost associated with holding it long term. Hopefully this all makes sense. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. Thanks for listening. This is another episode of UnWoke Academy, and if any of this resonates with you or generates a question, ping me. I'd love to answer your questions. Thanks for listening.